Thank you for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here in Berlin. Okay, you know that human intolerance and unacceptance has been the primary reason for the extermination of many wildlife populations in the world. So here in this talk, I will talk about people's perceptions and values and how they affect wildlife conservation. This picture is of my village, Teremiski. It's in the center, in the heart of the Polish side of the Białowieża forest. These are my neighbors and our bison. And Białowieża forest is important because it was the place, one of the places where the European bison in the wild went extinct. And also because it was the scenario where took place the first reintroduction of the European bison in the 50s. Since then, and thanks to huge conservation efforts, the population has been growing up to 6,000 individuals distributed in 47 free-ranging populations. So here in Poland, in the Polish side, we have around 700 bison. We live nicely together with them. They cross the road, our gardens. People like to observe them, and they are a reason of pride for Polish people. The same animal was a reason for fear in Germany. I am sure that many of you know this famous case, and I'm sorry for bringing it back. But this happened in 2017 in September, and adult bison roaming from Poland crossed the other river, reached the city of Lebus, and then it was the first bison in Germany, coming wild, in over 2 centuries. Authorities quickly decided to shoot the animal dead because of the danger the potential danger to the public. Of course, this was widely covered in the international Polish and German media, and even the bison has a nationality. It was Polish bison killing in a German city. But even these differences among countries are a fact, also even for semi-domestic animals. You all know the cases or the famous cows in India, where they are a beloved and very respected animals. They roam free and unmolested, even in busy streets. And they are especially important. They are sacred for most of the Hindu community. And they are also protected by law, and their slaughtering is prohibited or restricted. In Spain, the same bulls and cows, they have a completely different view. There are many traditions in Spain that involve bulls, not only bullfighting, there are many. And I mean, these views seems to come from very old. Yeah, of course, all the people in the pictures, they will tell you that they deeply love bulls, but there are some loves that kills. Yeah, so it seems that bulls play a prominent role in the religious ceremonies of prehistoric Iberian tribes. Later, the influence of Greek and Romans transformed this cult into spectacles. And nowadays, they are considered ritual entertainments, and they are under a huge discussion in the society, under a huge debate. So this dualism of human and nature relationships has been described by Edward Wilson as biophilia, or love of nature, and biophobia, or fear of nature. Other authors, like Thompson and Barton, has described as ecocentrism, which means valuing nature for its own sake, and anthropocentrism, which means valuing nature because of the benefits it can provide to humans. And more recently, and in relation to wildlife, this dualism or these dual views has been termed mutualistic and dominant, which already Ilse has explained, and I will not go in detail, but just to remember that mutualist people see wildlife as a partner, as part of the social network, and dominants see wildlife as a subordinate and something that has to be used in some ways to benefit humans. So you need to remember that values are formed at an early age. They change minimally over one's life, and they tend to keep the same across generations, and they represent a very important part of the transmission of culture. In this study, Schwartz identified the culture of 76 national groups from 73 countries. And he did this based on three dimensions of cultural values. The first one, the first one is the relation of the person with the group. And then the two dual views are autonomy, affective or intellectual, versus embeddedness. So persons are viewed by some cultures as autonomous entities, and in other cultures they are seen as entities which they are embedded in the collectivity. The second dimension deals with the way or the responsibility towards society and the welfare of others, and the two dual views are egalitarianism and hierarchy. And the third cultural dimension, which is also the most relevant in the context of these talks, is the relationship of humans with their natural and social environment. And we have two responses, mastery and harmony. Harmony emphasizes viewing the world as it is, trying to understand, trying to appreciate instead of changing or directing somehow. Yeah? So in harmony cultures, for example, important values are peace, unity with nature, and environmental protection. Mastery cultures are on the other extreme, and they encourage to change, to master, and to direct the natural and the social world to achieve personal or group goals. So values, for example, like success, ambition, or competence are very important in master cultures. So as far, for example, the examples we saw before, we have here Spain and India. They are quite different. And also Germany, Eastern and Western Germany, and Poland are quite separate. So we need to think that the values are really different from one side to the other. Schwartz identified 7 cultural groupings, let's say. Here we have Western Europeans, then English-speaking, Latin Americans, Eastern Europeans, African and Middle East, then here the South Asian, and then these countries influenced by Confucianism. In this scale of harmony and mastery, these scores, which each country has, were compared with the domination values of wildlife by ancestry in the United States. So this study was quite interesting because it found that how dominant an American is depends to a great extent in her or her country of origin. So, for example, Dutch Americans, which score quite high, the positive axis means that you are higher scoring on domination on mastery. So Dutch Americans score quite high in mastery and also very high on wildlife value orientation. On the other extreme, we have the Mexican Americans, which score low on dominant, the same that their counterparts living in Mexico. So human-wildlife relationships are really very complex, and we have seen how ancestry, religion, and culture can shape this relationship. Also, our personal values, perceptions, and attitudes can also influence. The history of coexistence is very, very important. Very often, relationships are becoming difficult when we humans, we have the landscape only for us for many centuries, and then suddenly it's coming a new species and we have to live with this, yeah? So for instance, the return of brown bears is often not welcome because the people has forgotten just how to behave if they encounter a bear, or how to protect their beehives and livestock. And just the relation, simply we forgot how to live together. Also the species itself sometimes varies a lot how our relations. Some species, like the wolves, for example, they are systematically untolerated. It doesn't matter that they make problems, damages or not, they are just unlike it. Also, the age and gender, and this was already raised here a few times, matters. Yeah? It seems that in general, women and older people tend to have more fear and be less tolerant for wildlife. Also, the place of living, what has been raised here, that usually People living in cities have some more tolerant attitudes than rural populations. But I have to say that in recent studies, when you dig a bit inside the problem, what we found is that it doesn't matter so much how far or close you live from the species in question, but just if you are a farmer or a hunter. In that case, you will tend to be negative independently of the place where you live. And here in my talk, I want to put a lot of focus on the way we manage wildlife, the legislation and the conservation status, because this is something that is in our hands to improve, and it's something that is really determining a good management can make that we can coexist with the species or that we permanently perpetuate the conflict. Large carnivores are a very good model to investigate relationship with humans because they have large special requirements. They often overlap with human activities. They also compete with humans over prey, and they cause damages to human property. So if one society accepts large carnivores, we can say that probably will accept most of the wildlife. Large carnivores were distributed historically across all Europe, but due to centuries of persecution and extermination, their populations suffered a huge decline. But this trend started to change from the 50s, and since then, the surface they occupied now is double. And this has been partly thanks to more tolerant attitudes toward them. In Europe, we have 4 species of large carnivores. Brown bears are the most abundant, with 17,000 individuals, followed by wolves, lynx, and wolverine, which occurs only in the 3 Fennoscandian countries. Most of the populations are transboundary. It means that the animals are managed and viewed differently on which side of the border they are. They are under different legislation or conservation regimes. Sometimes here they are protected and sometimes here not. And this is also affecting the way we tolerate and we see them. The management of damages is really important because it's the main source of conflict with large carnivores. So the damage and prevention programs has become a very important tool to improve tolerance towards large carnivores. Just basically, I think most of the people you know, but the system in Sweden, some damages are paid a priori, but usually the damages are paid a posteriori. It means that when a damage is done, it has to be claimed to the corresponding authority or body. Then a damage inspector or verified agent is coming, is reporting the damage and quantifying the losses. And then it's paid by the competent administration is paying. This payment can be very fast or very low and can be fair or not. And how well the system works will improve a lot, will influence a lot how the tolerance is. I have to say that we did a review of the compensation programs in Europe, and the one that seems to be most effective in mitigating damages and reducing the conflict is when it's conditioned to the existence of preventive measures. I mean, the payment is only done if you demonstrate that you use prevention. On the other hand, such as systems that they pay systematically and unconditionally everything, they seem to make the conflict chronic. So this is a study that my team was leading. It shows the mean number of claimed bear damages per year and management unit or country with different bear populations to livestock, apiaries, agricultures, and others. So what you can see is that there is a huge variation in the number of damages, which means there is also a huge variation in the level of conflict among European countries. And Norway is with difference the country with the highest claimed damages caused by 100 bears. At the same time, the same bears in Sweden, which is number 16, make very few damages, but Sweden has a population of 3,000 bears. The same example is here. For example, you have Slovenia with 7, also the second one in importance, which has half the bear population than Croatia, which is number 8, and also has a very low level of damage. These damages, or these claimed damages, are paid, and they are, they are, in the truth, we are paying for tolerance, yeah? But not always this money is achieving this goal. So there are huge differences. We also check all the damages for all large carnivores in Europe, and we have quite a lot of difference among species. This amount of euros are compensated for differences in the country. The more expensive was the wolverine, followed by wolf, bear, and lynx. But also we see huge differences among countries. While one bear costs more than 9,000 euro per year in Norway, in Croatia, it costs just 9 euro. If you remember the previous slides, this amount of money does not necessarily translate into a low level of conflict. When we took or we pull all this money paid per year in Europe, we see that 68% of the total cost is to pay free depredation and extensing free ranging livestock. So how the way we manage our properties is also really, really important, yeah, to shape these conflicts. Most of them were to semi-domestic reindeer in the northern countries and to free-ranging sheep in Norway. And now I want to focus on two countries which I have been working, because we have together one project with Norwegian colleagues, and which I think a priori, or we thought that a priori, they are quite different regarding attitudes to wildlife. Poland has a long history or a long tradition of protection of wildlife, sometimes back to even the 14th century. It was the place where the last European megafauna survived, like aurochs and tarpan, and also the last lowland bison. And it is also the first country in the world that tried a reintroduction project of a large carnivore. And this was brown bears in Białowieża, but then the Second World War spoiled the whole thing. So all large carnivore species are protected in Poland, and they can be removed only under a special permit and if they are problem animals. Historically, Norway seems to have a more utilitarian way of dealing with nature. Vikings seems to have been obsessed with wolves for very long, and Nordic societies are still obsessed with them to some level, yeah? The Rough Data is a Norwegian agency for large carnivore monitoring, and they have a wolf counter. It means that they have identified all individual wolves in every moment, their DNA, where they are, and the exact numbers. So Norway allows for the regulated culling or hunting of large carnivores to reduce the damages to this free-ranging livestock that we see anyway is not, according to my opinion, is not very effective, because they still have to pay a lot of money. So that's why they need this very exact monitoring, because these numbers of large carnivores allowed depend on they have a fixed number of individuals, reproductions, or family groups. Over these numbers, they have to be eliminated. And this is a political goal. It's not scientific, and it's also an intense debate in the society with this. If we see the basic data between Poland and Norway has double surface than Poland, but has only almost 5.5 million inhabitants. I think just 1 million more than Berlin, right? Poland has 7 times this number, which yields a human density of 1 order of magnitude higher in Poland. So this number of people in this landscape, or share this landscape with a similar number of bears, a similar number of lynx, but a very different number of wolves. When in Norway we talk about 100 wolves, in Poland we talk about 1,000. So we did a study with our Norwegian colleagues, because we wanted to see, we expected difference between Norway and Poland in the way they valued the presence of large carnivores in the forest for recreation. So we did a survey or a questionnaire to 1,000 respondents in each country, and we used these choice experiments with, which is, the respondent has to choose one choice, which forest he or she will prefer to visit, depending on the type of forest, how diverse it was, how many tree species, how old, and if it has presence of deadwood or not. In one word, how natural was looking the forest, and if it was inhabited by by large carnivores or not, and we use as a response the willingness to travel. It means how many kilometers the person will be willing to travel more or less to visit or avoid a forest with large carnivores. And what we got, it was that there are no neutral opinions. I mean, you are or either positive or negative. And we found that 2/3 of the respondents, the green ones, were positive in both countries, which for us was very surprising, and that more people are in the large carnivore positive than negative class. We saw that, as we talked before, that there are differences among species. For example, the most accepted or the most liked was the lynx. People will be willing to travel 30 kilometers more to visit a forest with lynx, and in Norway, like about 15. But we also see that the negative preferences, though they are less people, they were stronger. So large carnivore negative people will be willing to travel much more kilometers to avoid a forest with presence of large carnivores. For example, in Norway, they will travel almost 70 kilometers more to avoid a forest with brown bears. In Poland was like about 31. Also very interesting is that we found that the people in the large carnivore negative would prefer more intensively managed forests, while the people in the large carnivore positive will prefer more natural looking forests. So there is also these dual views that we have been talking not only about wildlife, but I think about the world. So just to conclude, we know that public preferences are very complex. The cultural and the country perceptions are very important and they need to be considered. So for example, exporting the Scandinavian model to an African country can be wrong from the very beginning. Values has the power to change human behavior. So they are very essential and they are a critical tool to achieve biodiversity conservation. We need to fully understand the human relationships with nature if we want to be successful. And we have seen promising shifts in society towards more mutualistic attitudes, and moving away from domination. But there are also some risky trends too. I don't know how it's in Germany, but in Spain now it's currently discussing the welfare of animals. And for example, cats, that we know that they are killing a lot of wildlife, they seem to be protected. So they are rights of wildlife versus domestic animals on the plate. Yeah? So that's all. Thank you for your attention.